Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters, where every week we sit down with a mental health expert to discuss all things mental health and more. And today we are speaking about men and mental health. Now, this is a really tricky topic. Despite all the research and narrative that has been done around mental health and encouraging people to speak out about it, we are finding that it is still difficult for men to come forward if they are struggling emotionally or psychologically. After the break, we are going to be speaking to Dez van Niekerk, who is going to tell us about toxic masculinity and how this places expectations on men that make it hard for them to cope, and why it's so difficult for men to come and speak out when they are struggling. But before that, let's have a look at a short video about how to raise emotionally strong girls and boys.
You have to empower girls, but you have to give complementary education for boys, that they have to be egalitarian. You have to nurture this. You have to talk to them all the time that of course girls can do this. You have to make movies that show that girls can do anything boys. They can drive trucks, they can be superheroes, including that of course you can marry Joe or Jack. You're teaching them about sexuality. This kind of work is important because masculinities is more rigid than femininities. So we allow girls a little more space to play with their identities. Boys, a lot more rigid as soon as they get to a certain age, that they can't wear certain things, they can't be pushing prams, but we allow girls to play with trucks. So you have to have this complementary work about patriarchy and about attitudes around equality for boys, girls, and other genders.
We talk about gender a lot, even with my son. He plays with dolls. They would tease him and say, "Hey, why are you playing with this? Why are you wearing this? Why are you wearing a skirt today?" I said, "There's nothing wrong. If he wants to play with girls, if he wants to put on a weave, it's okay. It suits him. And if we go to the shop, if he says, 'I want you to buy a doll for me,' the Barbie doll with high heels, I do that." And people at the shop would say, "Hi, but why are you buying a boy this?" I said, "He wants to." And I would educate them, even at the mall. I say, "Listen here, if I buy this, I'm not buying this because I want him to be a lesbian or gay or what, but I'm teaching him nurturing because he's going to be a father. So you must know that if you've got a girl, you must do certain things to a girl. You must buy pads and so on." So he's fully aware. If I ask him if I'm taking a bath, I said, "Oh, please bring me panty liner." He will know what a panty liner is. Even all of them, they know, because that's how I am. I'm open. That's the kind of relationship we have.
You have to think very hard about the work that you need to put in raising kind, generous, happy, egalitarian boy. Actually, this is a lot of work, a lot of invisible work.
How are we empowering girl children when they have to constantly be the ones to push back? And so you've got to get men, male identifying people, masculinities, to recognize how they will benefit from an egalitarian society, that they can have more engaged relationships with other men, more engaged relationships with their intimate partners, more engaged relationships, with their children. And I think this is something that we were talking about before in some of the research that we've been doing, the workshops we've been doing. There was a little boy who was playing with a shoe, and he was tying it on his back, and he was putting it to sleep, and all that kind of thing. And so our colleagues in the workshop raised the issue of whether he could have a doll. And that, that's just gone one step too feminine. But then we're surprised when young men grow up to become completely disengaged and unable to care and empathize and, look after children.
The work of raising girls who are amazing, who are awesome, is a constant. It just has to happen every day, talking about it, modeling. But then if the neighbor doesn't raise boys to be like that, you have a problem. You really have a problem, because the violence is going to be there, the inequality, they just pushing back that, no, you think you're awesome, but I'm going to show you you're not awesome. You can't be walking here. You can be in this space.
I just wish I could unsee a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing and like not care, because it just makes you think too much, right? But I feel like the opposite burden, I actually don't want to have it, where I become complicit by not seeing and not caring.
So if there's inequality outside and you are this family or this person, what do you do with it? Do you live it forever?
What do you mean?
The inequality that you see outside in the school, you take your kid to school and they're teaching them gender is this. This is how it is. You can't stand in this queue. You can't do this. You can't want to play soccer because soccer is only for boys. You can't do robotics. Robotics only for boys. You can't play the guitar. So they're always streaming your child. What do you do with that?
Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters, and we are sitting in studio today with Dez van Niekerk from InsideOut NPO, who facilitates healing circles in communities. And Dez, you've also facilitated men's healing circles, and so thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So Dez, today we are speaking about men and mental health. And so, there is a lot of narrative around mental health, and there's new research coming out all the time. And obviously on Mental Health Matters, we speak about different aspects of mental health. But we thought it was important to speak specifically to men and mental health because despite all of the research that I do, it's still very difficult to sort of view men within that context, and I know for men to speak out about mental health. And so I wanted to ask you, why is it so difficult to speak about men and mental health?
So it's a very difficult conversation for men to have, specifically based on the historical context around this thing. All right. So if you look at war and the way that men respond to war, or the way that men are socialized into war. So war is a state, it's a construct where men go and they must distance themselves or disconnect from their emotions in order to participate successfully in the war or the practice of war. So then for men to come back, there's no reintegration for that man that has been exposed to this kind of conflict back into his family. All right. So he comes back, and he comes back as a soldier. So how does he then engage with his family who are not socialized into war, who have been left behind? Right? And so a lot of there's lots of recent research around mental health in men specifically. So if you look at how mental health plays out in the emotions that people have, or the mental state that they have, the capacity to do things, the ability to show up, and how they show up. So a lot of the mental capacity of men is defined into one kind of category, in South Africa specifically, especially around gender-based violence. So if that man is then seen as the perpetrator, how does he then work through that issue for himself without any support, right? When he shows up already determined or predetermined as a perpetrator. So mental health really, in this concept, for men is like, it's a taboo. You don't talk about your emotions. You don't talk about what you're thinking about, all right? And so your socialization then is different or looks different. So sport, as an example, has specifically been developed for men, all right? So I mean, we see nowadays women are also getting involved in all of these different kinds of codes. But when this sport was developed, it was actually developed around war, or the concept of war. So just think about this. So if you're going into battle, and you know that your survival depends on your mental state, all right? So you go in there cold. You distance yourself from your emotions. You forget about the people at home. You forget about all of the things that you've been, because all of the things you've been through, because what's of paramount importance for you is this battle that lies ahead, right? And so the way that you engage with this battle will then determine the outcome for yourself, right? Whether you survive, whether you come out wounded, or whether you come out unscathed, right? So historically, that's how men were socialized. So now if you take that same context and you bring it home, all right, and you place it in the home context, how does that man reintegrate himself into family when it's not about, your wife is not your enemy, all right? Your children is not your enemy, okay? So how do you then engage? Because if there's no clear defined enemy, what do you then do? How do you process the things that you're experiencing, especially when it comes to the disconnect around behavior, or around emotions? So one of the things we're saying is that the way that a man thinks, or what he thinks about, triggers his emotions, his feelings, and that feeling brings the action. So let's take a practical example. If this man feels that he's not valued, he's not appreciated, he's unemployed, he's not fitting all of the frames, of man or manhood, or the masculine idea of a man, he's not fitting all of those things, right? So what he's thinking about brings about his emotion, all right? So his feelings. So if he's thinking that he's worthless, what's his feelings? And so if his feelings is about, it's not just sadness, it's also this homicidal impulse, right, of taking my own life and all of that kinds of things. How does he act? And how does that then affect the rest of the people that surround him? His family, the extended family, his mother. And we're not even bringing into play how he's been brought up.
Yeah.
The community that he comes from.
I want to ask about that because you were speaking about, you came in with the examples of war, and you came in with the examples of sport and how men are socialized. And especially I want to jump onto disassociating from sort of like our feelings and our emotions. And we know one of the first things that boys are taught, I wrote a whole piece about how my dad used to say to my brother when he was little, "Oh, cowboys don't cry," right? So the first thing is that those emotions, the emotions, and I'm not going to discriminate, emotions are squashed, are invalidated. Fear is invalidated. Crying and sadness is invalidated. And we know, there's a broader sort of discussion about how children are raised to be seen and not heard, and their feelings in itself are invalidated. But for men specifically, for boys specifically, their very normal feelings of fear and sadness and so forth, they are taught to disassociate it from those.
Yeah. It's very interesting. There's three things that I call that the enemies of men. All right. The one is competition. All right. So the boy is socialized into competition when he's still young. You'll see it on the playing fields at the school. He will be playing with his friends, and the comments would be, "My father's stronger than your father."
Yeah.
My father's driving a better car than your father. All of that kinds of things. So it's really about already socializing into competition. So when they grow up, men, they take that into manhood, the competition thing. So we have these phrases like keeping up with the Joneses. But for the man, it's not even about keeping up with the Joneses. It's about outsmarting. It's about being better. And in order to do that, you have to distance yourself from the kind of weak or perceived weak emotions, which is the crying in public, which is the affection in public. There's a shift now, especially around sport. You will see these men will celebrate. They will slap one another on the bottoms and all of that in their celebration. But those same men don't do that at home, or their own partners, as an example. So the one thing is around the affection, or the competition. Right? The second thing is about silence. So a lot of times, the emotion that the boy is experiencing, the feeling, the pain, the hurt, is not acknowledged. It's undermined. So it's put on the back burner. So in other words, if the boy is told that cowboys don't cry, what they're saying in effect is that your crying makes you something else, not a man. So it's not I think, it's not legitimizing the emotion, the pain, really. So then the man gets disconnected from his pain, or the boy grows into becoming disconnected from his pain. All right. So when he's with his partner or he's with his family, and there's a traumatic event, he struggles to show emotion in that event. Or if he breaks down, then it's seen as abnormal. What's going on with this guy? Can't he control himself? Why is he crying? And all of that. So it's the way that he has been socialized. The last thing is loneliness. So loneliness is a massive thing for men. All right. You will find, that's why you find all of these on the yard. So I'll say in the Cape Flats. People are sitting on the yard at the merchant, at the, or they will be in the bar, or they will be around sporting events. That's where you find men. They gravitate towards that, because in that setting, they feel the sense of belonging. All right. So why is it then that groups of people or groups, numbers, gives men a sense of identity or a sense of belonging, and not the family context?
Let's talk about that. I actually wanted to ask you to expand on that. So why are men so lonely? Why is there a lack of belonging within, you spoke about family, but within the structures that they're growing up?
So a couple of things that happens for the man is that working through this whole thing of the competition. Right. So if imagine he's in competition with his brother, and the brother lives in a better home, he has a better job, drives a better car. All right. So already he comes with a deficit into even if it's a family gathering, or just where guys are meeting. And so that for him, because material things, tangible things, also means a lot for men. Stuff they can hold on to. So they say men or boys and their toys.
Yes.
So the concept around that is that because boys have grown up in a context where your identity is located within that family, especially on the community, in the community. So if he is now moving away, we call that a quiet state, right? And he wants to cut with that family, then it becomes about what do I have, how do I show up, the things so it's outside of himself, and those things bring loneliness, because if you're in the workplace and you must compete the whole time for acceptance, for validation, for affirmation, that you didn't get from your father at home or any adult man at home. No one affirmed you besides when there's personal benefit. So an example would be if you're a good soccer player, the coach would affirm you because it's personal benefit for the team, right? Or for the coach, but also for the team, right? But it's not about you really. It's not about acknowledging your skill. It's not about acknowledging how you show up or looking about what's wrong around or what's missing in your makeup. It's really about this one thing that you're good at that we will celebrate.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then we become lopsided as men because we start concentrating on that one thing that gives us affirmation or validation. And so the other things are missing. So we don't build the relationships, lasting relationships. There's an example of this guy, two farmers who lived next to each other, right? And because of the drought, the one farmer sold up. They've been living there for 25 years. They've been battling all of the struggles, the fires, the drought, all of that kinds of things. When they left, or busy leaving, the man got out of his car, shook his neighbor's hand, and said, it was good living next to you. The women exchanged numbers. They were communicating still long after, but this guy left a whole life behind without making contact with his neighbor. So it's this whole thing about how do men build lasting relationships. When it's not about competition, it's not about what you have, it's really about who you are as a person, and how I can value as a person, rather than what you bring.
Yes.
So one of the things we talk about in our program is what happens to the man if the value of his value is connected to the size of his wallet or his bank account.
And that's so important, right? We see this all the time. And then one of the questions I did want to ask you is about this materialism, right? About this culture of consumerism also, which we see, I had always been fascinated in the community that I came from and many others how important brand names were when we were kids. I remember specifically thinking, you know, thank goodness I'm a girl, and I had brothers, but I was like, thank goodness I'm a girl because I can still get away with having sort of like one Levi jeans and then being able to wear non-brand name like skirts and t-shirts. But it was very difficult to be a boy because everything had to be a brand name, from your t-shirt to your tackies to your socks, even to, you know, they were. I think we've diversified now. You know, with sort of cheaper brands coming in, and it's a little bit easier, but there's still a deep sense of men attaching their worth to materialism. And we could say from a gendered perspective, it's women and how they look and their bodies, and we know how this is used in a different type of consumerist culture in terms of the things that are sold to us. But there seems to be women, like you said, they're still aware of inherent qualities. They can still be friendly, and then that's acceptable. They still form really deep relationships. It's different with men. It is as if their whole identity is based on like what they're wearing and what they have and the car they drive, and that's also the things that they're working towards. And I want to make this thing. We are seeing a lot of successful men who have the car and the clothes and the money and the house. They've worked really hard for it, and they get there and they are not happy. It hasn't filled the hole. The problems are still there. The behaviors are still there. So it's fascinating because having the money and the cars didn't fix it. Tell us about this, you know, about this thing where are we not, do we not really see boys and men?
It's interesting that you're talking about fixing it. All right. Because if you want to fix something, something's broken. All right. And for these men, or for men, they don't see themselves as broken. They don't even see, so you find men who grow up with single parents who are mothers. They don't even see that the missing link, the father that's absent, has an effect on them. All right. So they deny that there is a role that the man or the voice of the father has plays or hasn't played in his life. Right? But because he doesn't recognize it or acknowledges it, it becomes a deficit. So you don't know what you're missing if you didn't have it.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't know how to play. But when he becomes a father, then it becomes a challenge. So the one thing around what you're saying about these men is the isolation, the silo that men grow up in. Okay. So if we are in competition all of the time, we find allegiance in a small number of people that we put our faith or trust in, as men now. So it will be a small group of real friends. Maybe one. You know, this is my buddy. This is my pal. I can call on him any time but it's about what he can provide for me. You know, so I can call him in the middle of the night when I'm stuck. He will get up from his home bed and he will come out and he will come and assist me.
Yeah.
Because that's my buddy, my pal. So, but that relationship is based on service. So what can I give and what can I take? You know, a lot of people just take, and this poor individual, he just gives and gives and gives, this man now. And then he gets to a place where he breaks down and his mental health is exhausted. 2020 showed us a lot of it with COVID, how men who were just giving and giving and giving all of the time, and when they lost their jobs, no one was around to give back to them. And they found themselves in isolation, in silos, in loneliness, in a place of being distraught. Because the pattern that he had, thinking that when he gives, he has a lot of friends. They say when days are dark, friends are few. All right. So it's really clear it's around material things.
And very interesting also that you're starting to break, but you say you're speaking about service. So even outside of sort of the material things, there's still sort of a culture of having to give something, having to, the worth laying somewhere outside of their inherent selves.
It's interesting how power plays out for men. So there's two things in power. The one is the way with men with men. The one thing is about how can others serve me, because I'm the leader, I'm the big, you know, I'm the guy, or how do I serve others in wanting or buying their friendship kind of thing. So if I give all of the time and I'm there and they're always on the phone, always sending a message. They never phone, they just send a message and say, man, I need electricity, I need this and that and that. And then you provide. It's about the power that you have. You know? So it gives you power, it gives you a sense of being in control. All right. But coming back to this question around men and the way that they grow up, you know. So
Des, I'm going to have to stop you before we get into it because we have to take a short break.
yeah.
And so we're going to come back to that question after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters, and we are speaking about men and mental health. And joining me in studio is Dez van Niekerk from the organization InsideOut NPO. And Des, before the break, we were speaking about sort of materialism and also how that plays out for men. There's a lot of competition in terms of the identity and how that is attached to sort of what they have. And also, you were speaking about men and power and how this manifests as either doing a lot of things for other people or getting other people to do things for you. And you were about to go into how boys are raised and how that affects all of this. So can we get back to how boys are raised?
Yeah. So there was a school of thought before, around the 1960s, that said that boys and girls are the same, absolutely the same.
In the 60s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then around the late 70s, early 80s, there was a research done around the stringing of boys and the stringing of girls and how they express their behavior. You know, they could have the same gene pool, but the expression of the behavior is different. And there was lots of books at that time printed about raising boys or raising Cain or all of that kinds of things, right? And they were talking specifically about strong-willed boys. Right? And so if you look at how all of these systems has been developed to nurture girls, I mean, education system as an example, were specifically designed to nurture girls, right? But not boys. If you look at the lessons, the time frame, it's 45 minutes. They reduce it now to 35 minutes. So some schools are doing it for 30 minutes. Right? All right. But the idea was that if we're designing this thing, that the concentration span of boys are way smaller, you know, shorter, and the developing or their development in relation to girls are also shorter or slower.
Yes.
All right. And so then this whole thinking came about, if this is true, if the findings that we have are true, how do we change the way we raise boys?
Okay.
Okay, because boys then have a deficit in the intellect or the way that they perceive things or the way that they want to play. You know, they want to be outside, they want to be in the dirt. School doesn't allow that. You know, you must be structured, you must sit in your desk, you must have your book in front of you. What if some of these boys can't concentrate like that? They can't work like that. But the system doesn't take that into account. And then you find out these boys are troublemakers. Right? They're in the office all of the time. They put out of the class, they're disruptive. Right? What we've discovered also then was that some of these boys can't read. You know? And so if they can't read, then their behavior sets in. Because then they must develop what we call defense mechanisms, all right, in order to navigate the fact that they can't read. Or they can, but not at the level where girls are. All right. And so what they do then, they become the joker in the class. All right. They disrupt, they make everything into a joke. If the question is asked, they turn it into a joke. So it becomes a defense mechanism. All right. Or they fight them. That's where bullying comes from. This big boy that can't really read. And there is a smaller boy in stature who is brilliant in class. And that's where that relationship starts of the abuse or the bullying, because he needs a service from this boy, right? And that service is to him is about how do you help me in order to look better, all right? To show up different. But the way that it's perceived, if those were adults, you know, and if that boy grows up into an adult serving the bully, all right? So even if he's now in a job where he's providing a service, and the client that he's working with has a kind of bully behavior, what happens to him psychologically? He goes back into that boy in the class being abused, being pushed around or shoved down the toilet or the dustbin or the dirt bin, all of that kinds of things, being thrown with stuff. So then his success or his experience, what is necessary for him then to show up differently, is to be successful. Right? Coming back to my earlier point. So in order for him to be successful, he isolates himself, pulls away. He spends all of the time in front of the screens. He studies hard, all of that kinds of things. And so what then happens is that he didn't deal with the issue of the bullying. He didn't deal with the issue of not being accepted. So when they're on the sport field, the bully is chosen first. He's the captain of the team. He doesn't choose him. He waits there in line and he doesn't get chosen because it's in unequal numbers. So he doesn't make the team. He doesn't make the cut. And so he then develops into this thing, this man, this beast, this animal kind of thing, where if I am successful, I can call the shots, I can measure up to this guy. And then his behavior becomes likewise. So this guy who was then being bullied on the playing fields at school, he becomes the bully in the workplace. And so he then pushes people around and he expects people to serve him, that kind of thing. And so it's the shift of that behavior that takes place. And then we talk about the original state, if that is his original state, versus the acquired state. Okay. And so there's a progression away from the original state. So all of us are like that. Most of us are like that. If we grow up in the township, and you go and you want to go and study, and you apply to UCT and you accept it, the first thing you do is to move away from the township, right? And you go and live on race, like that. So the first step in your gravitating towards a new identity is moving away from your original state. And then everything in that acquired state then becomes who you are. So then you cut yourself off from the family because you don't want to go and visit them, you don't even go home for Christmas, all of those kinds of things, because you have an assumed identity. But what we forget in that assumed identity is that the people who are already there, of more privileged backgrounds, don't have to do anything. They just show up there. But what we need to do in order to get there, this is the mental state that we go through, is that we lay off. It's a lot of costs. We cut with family, we cut with the old friends, we change the way we speak, we change the way we show up, all of that kinds of things. And even when you're asked, where do you stay, we say Mowbray, or where do you come from? I live in Mowbray, or I live in Observatory. There's no coming from Athlone, or coming from Khayelitsha or Gugulethu, or from Ottery, or from or Bonteheuwel. There's none of that. It's about, no, this is my new assumed identity. All right? And that is costing us. It's costing us in isolation. It's costing us friendship, true friends, because those people don't know really who you are. They accept you for what you have become here.
Yeah.
So they have set the bar for humanity that you're now fighting against, or achieving towards, or moving towards. There's a bar that determines how you are valued or seen, that is called the bar of humanity. And that is, even if you look at the tertiary institutions around Cape Town, historically, UCT versus UWC versus Stellenbosch, and just the way people navigated around those things. And what if you don't go to university?
And so, and the other thing is also, sorry to cut you, but also thinking about sort of the type of job that you have. So we're looking at, we've progressed from sort of, what you wear and what car you drive. Were things really when you're very young, now what type of gadgets you have, etc. To progressing to getting older and then looking at, the job that you have, the schooling and the type of education you've had, and all of these bars are set. What's emerging for me then is a question around what we base our worth on. And I think the question around, I do a lot of work also in gender and around women and how women have traditionally been oppressed in terms of what they're supposed to be. The bar for women is very low for acceptability. The bar for girls is very low. We speak about, there's many, many papers about how this has disrupted women's progress. But essentially, you can be a pretty girl, and should strive to be a pretty girl, You could be smart, a princess, etc. You know, it's really just like really, you put on the princess dress, you can put on some makeup, you can straighten your hair. Every Christmas, you know, the aim is to be the pretty girl. And I'm wondering, you're making me wonder about, and that's the box we put women in. Women are fighting to be recognized for something other than how they look. And they are fighting to say that we are so much more than what we look like, right? And you've brought up in terms of women and intelligence and schooling and so forth. But I'm wondering about the box that we put boys in. If the bar for girls is so low, the bar for boys, as you're describing it, in terms of worth, is so high. You know, they have to be really good at something to be able to stand out. They have to be really good at sport in order to, it's almost like there has to be something extra, or they have to be really masculine, or they have to be, I mean, these are questions about like humanity and being recognized as human beings, and I think questions of dignity also that we don't think about when we think about children. But I'm wondering, what is it about the way we think about boys that they need something extra to be valued? And is this is what it sounds like, it feels like to them, like they are not enough as in their own right, whether they have a successful brother or sister or not, whatever, just the fact that we don't value boys in their own right unless they have something piled on top of it. And do you think that's a box that you think they feel that way?
Yeah. I mean, challenges for boys growing up. If there's one boy in a family of girls, it's different, right? To the many boys, or a lot of boys with one girl.
Yeah.
So the socialization in the family is different. Outside is still the same. Those boxes, you go to school, there's that box. You know, if you are muscular and all of that, you fit the frame. That's where you go. You know, you go into sport, whether you want to or not. You know, your physical stature demands that you show up like that. Okay? Otherwise, you're undervalued. And so boys will change their dreams, as an example. What if that boy wanted to be a nurse? All right? But because of the way that it's built and because the way that people see him, especially in the schooling system, and the school is a rugby school or a basketball school or whatever, sport they focus on, he's directed in that, you know, he's steered in that direction. He has to go there because this is our priority.
So let me ask you something. So with women, right, they have been fighting for access to institutions, right, where that have been built without them, where they haven't belonged. Can't be doctors, must be nurses, right? And so we've seen this upward trajectory. And we've seen that, yes, the path to there has been to break down barriers, to change legislation, to change the rules. It's very different for a man. If he wants to be a nurse or a hairdresser or something, it's very difficult to even visualize what that path could be, because that seems like a path backward or wrong way, right? I'm just saying in terms of the type of backlash that he would get from society. Men are required to, there is a baseline of what a real man is. Let me ask you this way also. Toxic masculinity, we often think about it in terms of gender-based violence. We think about it in terms of toxic behavior. But toxic masculinity is also toxic expectations for men.
So it's again around the standard or the box you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the boundary that's been set.
Yes.
So even women have these expectations of men
Yes.
around the masculine identity.
Yes.
Okay. So if it doesn't fit that frame,
Yeah.
he's non-conformant or is something else.
Yeah.
Right. But if he wants to be identified as this masculine identity, he has to fit this frame, and that's the socialization into this.
Yeah.
So what is that identity? It's power over, exercising power over someone else.
Yeah.
All right. So we call it leadership. All right. But it can be toxic leadership.
Yeah.
Also. So now you have men in power in institutions, as an example. Right. Now we have the progression of women coming into the labor force, you know, the labor market, all of those kinds of things. And what then happens is that she becomes the head, the CEO. But you'll find very quickly that her behavior is similar to when the man was there. You know? And the reason for that is not her as an individual, is the post that was created around the masculine identity. And so the woman then becomes the masculine identity in the workplace, even though she is wanting to break down all of that stereotyping, right? And you'll find that, especially in powerful positions, it can be a man, it can be a woman, but the behavior is the same. You know, so it's again, it's the toxic position and the way that we expect that. And so how do we change this thing? We must change the narrative. We must break down all of these things.
Yes, so that's what I wanted to ask you about. So I just want to, if we're speaking to men there, and we're unpacking really the history of what leads us to feelings of worthlessness, feelings of needing to compensate for deficits, and where does this take men in terms of mental health?
Yeah. So there's a flip side. Obviously, if there's a negative, there's a positive, right? And so, if the man is experiencing affirmation, if he's experiencing this glorification of the manhood for himself in the negative, it's very difficult to flip to the positive, right? Because what is he prepared to give up? You know, because he must give up something, all right? And one of the things they must give up is the power. No one will relent power. No one is going to give it up. Okay? We've seen in our history around force and the way that we use mass movements. Right? Is about how do we topple this power, because he's not going to give it up, we're going to take. So, but what if that man comes to a place where he says, I must start sharing this power, you know, I must start bringing people into this place, into this position, and start delegating it, start trusting people more, you know. So it's not just about my own ability, but it's also about other people's ability. So how do I start then affirming others in their development in assuming a post like that? All right, so who do I mentor? Who do I coach? All right, how do I pick up negative behavior in them? How do I start breaking down that negative behavior and looking in replacing the negative behavior with something positive that we can reinforce? So in other words, we keep you accountable. If you give you a word and you break that word, we keep you accountable. Why are you late? You said you will be at 8 o'clock, but you're not. Why? You know, as a man, don't come and blame with the taxi strike and all of those kinds of things. You must make alternative ways because you must be responsible. So that's the kind of thing, and how do we start shifting this mental behavior? Because the one thing that on the flip side, on the other side, is this whole thing of blame, guilt, shame, all right, all of those kinds of things. And we can find many of those conversations, or many causes to my state, okay, the way that I perceive things. We have been, you know, colonized, we have been in slavery, we have been under apartheid, we have not been able to get jobs. Okay, but so now how do you show up then? That's different then. And part of it is breaking the historical context of that. So even in the systems, we need to break it down. So example is, in the 1800s, Cesare Lombroso, Italian guy, developed what is now called the criminal profiling. Okay, it's still used in law today, right? In the law, in the way that police uses criminal profiling. Okay, SAPS uses the base law, and in law, in you know the NPO, in the way that they use criminal profiling. But it comes from this guy, Cesare Lombroso, 1825. He developed this thing, and what he was developing was the segregation of what they called white and non-white people. All right, so it was really based on describing and keeping people separate, and we call it criminal. So in other words, if you're not fitting their frame, you are a criminal, right? And you must prove yourself. This is where the bar of humanity comes from. You must prove yourself that you're gravitating towards what they deem as human and not where you come from. All right? And so the criminal profiling will look at your hair, it will look at your nose, it will look at your lips and your eyes and how it's formed, look at your ears, look at the front teeth, the missing front teeth or front teeth, but it's big, it's bigger than the other teeth. All of that kind. So physical attributes.
Very similar to apartheid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that physical, but his profiling came right through the generations into up unto us today. So now you have the Tsotsi or the Scully mentality, right? So if you go for a job interview and you fit that criminal frame, you know, that profiling, and you're going in there, you can have the degree, you can have the quiet state, But the first thing you must prove is that you're not a scullion.
No, exactly, and that is very, and that is ingrained now, right? We're in a way that we're not even aware of it. Dez, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters, and we are still in studio with Dez van Niekerk from InsideOut NPO, which is an organization that really helps people to come together to deal with trauma. They do workshops around support, and today we are speaking about, we've been speaking about men and mental health. And Dez, you've given us so much context in terms of, you know, how boys are raised, how we view men, the boxes that they are placed in, the expectations on them that lead to feelings of worthlessness or basing their worth on materialism, things that they have. We don't have a lot of time left, but I think I want to speak to, so we have a greater understanding of what might be causing mental health issues in men. And they are ingrained across systems. They're ingrained in the way we view men and boys, in toxic masculinity, in toxic expectations of masculinity. You know, there's a funny story where they say women say they want sensitive men to speak about their feelings, but when men speak about their feelings, women don't respond. You know, that's not really what they want, and so it becomes a joke. But it happens. So if men are struggling with their mental health, we started the show saying, why is it so difficult for men to speak about mental health? We've really unpacked a lot of those reasons. If they are out there and they are struggling with their mental health, what are ways that they can sort of bridge that? I'm thinking it probably feels very unsafe for them to speak out.
Again, it's not about the safety, it's about the judgment.
Yes.
All right. So if a man currently now is experiencing abuse, how does he step out and speak about it without being judged?
Yes.
All right. So can a man say that I've been raped by a woman? You know. So we had a situation in one of our programs where a man did that, and the police just laughed at him. And the questions they were asking, didn't you enjoy it? Why are you here? Shouldn't you go back and have some more? Those are some of the comments. And so for men it's really, really difficult to do that. But the first step is to speak up. You know, speak up. If you identify something in yourself and you see that you are digressing into loneliness and sadness, and you know, tiredness, exhaustion is part of depression. And if you see yourself, you find yourself spiraling in a negative direction, speak out, ask for help. It's not a shame for a man to ask for help. So ask for help, you know, reach out. You know, if the person you're speaking to don't know, go somewhere else. Find someone else. Don't stop trying to find a way out. You know? So that's the one thing, which I think it's important for men to understand, that there will be no judgment when you're asking for support and help.
Yeah.
So we run the healing circles in communities. That's an open space really, where you can come and just be part and be anonymous if you want to. Because I mean, there's a lot of people there. You can just tell your story. No one's going to ask, or get to know you there. There will be guidance and support and help, but it won't be judgmental.
Yeah.
You know? So that's the other thing. And then one of the things that we over-medicate as men, self-medicate. So men don't easily go to doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists or even social workers, right? Or counselors at the church, as an example. You know, religious institutions provide the counseling services. Men don't go there. And the reason for that is because they are fearful of being exposed. All right. So in other words, men don't trust that spaces because of previous experiences of it not being a confidential space.
Okay.
All right. So in communities, as an example, if I'm in the community and I'm the counselor and you come to my house, people see you coming in. That's the first thing. All right. The second thing is that I might even start saying, you know, who was here today? You know, that kind of thing. And so it's really about how do we build the confidence and the confidentiality around this issue. You know, non-judgmental spaces, confidentiality, and then support them. You know, whenever the man needs the support, if he picks up the phone, you need to respond. Because it took him a long time to get to that point to pick up that phone, building up the courage to speak. And so then there needs to be someone on the other side, that listens. And a lot of these times when men start speaking, it's really just about listening. Because it hasn't been listened to. As a boy, we spoke about that earlier, how we were socialized, we were silenced most of the time. It's easy for a man to retreat into silence. I call it the island of silence. He retreats into silence, and then no one knows what's going on with him. Because through his life, whenever someone asks him, are you okay? He says, no, I'm fine. I'm all right. Don't ask. I'm cool. I'm all right. They have all these great words. All right. And so when he starts speaking, it comes as a shock to the people that he's living with. So again, when he starts speaking for the first time, the man expects people to respond. They don't respond. It's fine if they don't respond because they haven't been prepared to respond. But the way that you speak, you must continue to speak. Take the people into your confidence. Talk about the struggles that's going on. Talk about what's happening in your head, right? Because what happens in your head becomes the action. And you want to change that action. Right? You want positive things here. And so there's a lot of things, that's the one side. The other side, the practical stuff that men can start doing is around reading. Start reading, not on the phone. There's something about what happens with the brain and the touch. Okay? So it's the sensory, touch, the feel, that kicks something in your brain that brings about healing. Okay? So it's interesting how we've been removed from paperback books, actual physical books.
Yeah.
So I have e-books and all of that kind of stuff, and we read online all of the time. But the brain doesn't register that as new information, okay? Because it doesn't pick it up as something is happening. So the feel in the hands of the book triggers that part of the brain that starts bringing the healing. So reading is one. Painting is another thing. All right, painting, shouting. Going to the beach, shouting, going for walks, being outside of your environment. Okay, so it's separating yourself from the toxic place. Okay, so getting out, going somewhere else. Right? It doesn't help if you go to your room and close the door behind you and you're on your phone. That doesn't help. You need to get out there, leave the phone. Get out. Get the sun and the wind into your face and hair.
Yeah. And we've known also sun has been, we've had psychologists on the show who have said just also the healing properties of sun and nature are very real, very tangible healing properties.
And change your diet.
Yes.
So sugar is one of the things you need to let go of. Sugar changes the patterns that develops in your brain. So sugar is very addictive. That's why you find sugar in all of the products.
Yeah.
In most products, in fact in all products, even if they say low fat or low sugar.
So Dez, we are out of time. I'm so sorry. I want to thank you so much for everything that you've brought here, and I know that this all of the points that you raised and the historical points that you raised, especially with regard to how boys are raised and the men that they become, but most especially the things that they can do if they are feeling out of depth. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And that brings us to the end of our show. We've had a great conversation about men and mental health, and we will see you again next week. I'm Lenina Rasool. Goodbye.